You might feel like she is just not that into you. She does not flirt very hard. She does not chase after you or send you a million messages. In fact, she stays very calm whenever you are around. Because of this, you probably think there is nothing going on between you two. But there is one very quiet behavior that most men completely miss. If you learn how to spot it, you will suddenly see that she has been thinking about you much more than she ever lets on. Before we go any further, I want you to think about someone right now. Someone whose behavior has left you confused. Maybe she seems interested one day and distant the next. Maybe you've spent nights replaying conversations in your head, wondering what they really meant. If someone comes to mind, let me know in the comments by typing the word curious. I'd love to know how many people are trying to decode the same mystery. And if you've ever felt confused by mixed signals, you're definitely not alone. I'm Mary Smith, host of Senior Mindful Living YouTube channel. You think she does not like you, but listen closely because you might be reading the signs all wrong. You think that when she acts distant, it means she is not interested. You think that when she is quiet, it means she has moved on to someone else. But what if I told you that some of the strongest feelings are often hidden behind the calmest behavior? Now, this does not mean that every woman who acts distant is secretly in love. That's an important distinction. Human relationships are far too complex for simple formulas. But there are certain psychological patterns that show up again and again when attraction, vulnerability, and emotional self-protection collide. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that attraction always looks confident. They believe that if someone likes them, that person will naturally become more expressive, more available, and more obvious. Real life rarely works that way. Think about the last time you cared deeply about someone. Did you always say exactly what you felt? Did you always act perfectly relaxed around them? Or did you sometimes overthink things, second-guess yourself, and worry about making the wrong impression? Most people recognize this behavior in themselves. Yet, when they see it in someone else, they misinterpret it completely. There is a fascinating psychological truth that many relationship experts discuss. The stronger our emotional investment becomes, the more vulnerable we feel. And vulnerability can trigger protective behaviors. In other words, the very feelings that pull us toward someone can also make us want to protect ourselves from being hurt. Imagine a woman who starts developing genuine feelings for a man. At first, everything feels exciting. She enjoys talking to him. She looks forward to seeing him. She catches herself smiling when his name appears on her phone. But then another emotion enters the picture. Fear. What if he doesn't feel the same way? What if she becomes too invested? What if she gets rejected? What if she looks foolish? Suddenly her mind begins creating strategies to protect her heart. This is where many men become confused because the behavior they expect to see is not the behavior that appears. Instead of moving closer, she may create distance. Instead of becoming more expressive, she may become more careful. Instead of revealing everything she feels, she may reveal almost nothing. And here's what makes this so difficult to understand. From the outside, emotional caution can look exactly like emotional indifference, but psychologically, they are not the same thing at all. Researchers who study attachment styles have found that many people cope with strong emotions by managing proximity. Some move closer, others create space. Neither response automatically tells you how much they care. It simply reveals how they handle emotional risk. I remember hearing a story from a woman in her 50s who described the beginning of her marriage. She said that when she first met her husband, she became so interested in him that she actually started avoiding him. Whenever he entered the room, she suddenly found something else to do. Whenever she wanted to call him, she convinced herself not to. Whenever she felt excited, she tried to appear completely unaffected. Years later, she laughed about it. She said, "The more I liked him, the harder I tried to hide it." Now, not everyone responds this way, but many do. And understanding this can completely change the way you interpret certain behaviors. Let's talk about the first quiet sign that often gets overlooked. She notices you more than you realize. Most people assume attraction is about being noticed. In reality, attraction is often about paying attention. When someone occupies our thoughts, we naturally become more observant. We notice their habits. We remember their routines. We become curious about the details of their lives. A woman who is emotionally invested may watch how you interact with other people. She may notice changes in your mood. She may remember things you said weeks ago that everyone else forgot. Not because she is trying to collect information, because her attention naturally returns to you. Think about your own life. Have you ever found yourself checking whether someone arrived safely? Wondering how their meeting went? Remembering something they mentioned months ago? That kind of attention doesn't happen by accident. The human brain is selective. It pays special attention to things that matter emotionally. This is why one of the strongest indicators of interest is not dramatic flirting. It's sustained attention. And here's where it becomes even more interesting. Sometimes the people who think about you most are the ones who reveal it least, because they are trying so hard to appear unaffected. You might catch her looking at you from across a room. You might notice that she quickly looks away when eye contact happens. You might discover that she somehow remembers details you barely remember sharing. Again, none of these signs prove attraction by themselves, but when several appear together, they often point toward something deeper. Let's go even further. Have you ever had a conversation with someone, and then weeks later they brought up a tiny detail you completely forgot mentioning? Maybe you talked about a stressful project at work. Maybe you mentioned your favorite childhood movie. Maybe you shared a story about your family. Then weeks later, they casually reference it. Most people don't realize how meaningful this can be. Memory follows emotional significance. We remember what matters to us. That's why a woman who recalls seemingly insignificant details may be revealing something important without even realizing it. Her brain has placed special value on information connected to you, and often she doesn't consciously decide to do this. It simply happens. There is another reason this matters. When someone repeatedly replays conversations in their mind, those conversations become easier to remember. They think about what was said, they analyze it, they revisit it. And every time they do, the memory becomes stronger. That's why a woman who likes you may remember details long after everyone else has forgotten them. Now here's a question I want you to think about. Has there ever been a moment when someone remembered something about you that genuinely surprised you? Something small. Something specific. Something that made you realize they had been paying attention all along. If so, hold that thought, because in a moment we're going to talk about a sign that becomes even harder to ignore. And this next one often reveals what's happening behind the scenes long before words ever do. Because there is a reason her friends sometimes know your name before they've ever met you. There is a reason certain people smile when you walk into a room. And there is a reason group dynamics can quietly expose feelings that someone is desperately trying to hide. One of the most revealing signs of hidden attraction often has nothing to do with the woman herself. It has to do with the people around her. Human beings process emotions socially. When we are excited about someone, confused about someone, or trying to understand our feelings towards someone, we often talk about that person with trusted friends. Not because we're gossiping, because we're seeking clarity. We want feedback. We want reassurance. We want another perspective. That is why friends often become accidental witnesses to feelings that have never been spoken out loud. Maybe you've experienced something like this before. You walk into a gathering and notice a strange smile exchanged between her and her friend. Someone makes a playful comment. A conversation suddenly changes direction when you arrive. Or a friend seems to know who you are before you've ever properly met. These moments might seem insignificant, but they can reveal that your name has come up more than once. When a woman is thinking about someone regularly, that person often becomes part of her conversations. She tells stories about interactions. She asks for opinions. She shares observations. Over time, her friends begin forming their own impressions. It's almost impossible to keep someone completely private when they occupy a significant amount of mental space. Now, I want to introduce an important reality check. This is where maturity matters. None of these signs should be used as proof that someone is obligated to return your feelings. Attraction is never a guarantee. Human behavior is nuanced. What we're discussing are tendencies, not certainties. The goal isn't to become a mind reader. The goal is to become a better observer, because healthy relationships are built on understanding, not assumptions. And that brings us to one of the most confusing behaviors men experience, the unexpected message. You haven't heard from her in days, maybe even weeks. Then suddenly she sends a meme, a question, a random thought, a reaction to something you posted. The conversation feels natural, easy, maybe even exciting. Then just when you think momentum is building, she disappears again. This pattern drives many people absolutely crazy. The immediate assumption is often, she's playing games. But psychology suggests there can be another explanation. Sometimes people experience what relationship researchers describe as an approach avoidance conflict. Part of them wants connection. Another part fears vulnerability. Part of them wants closeness. Another part worries about what happens if things become serious. As a result, they move forward and then retreat. Forward and retreat. Not because they are trying to manipulate anyone, because they are managing their own emotions. Think about standing at the edge of a cold swimming pool. You want to get in. You know you'll probably enjoy it, but the initial discomfort makes you hesitate. You step forward, then back, then forward again. Emotional vulnerability can feel very similar. The desire for connection is real. The fear is real too. And when those two forces collide, behavior can become inconsistent. Now let's talk about something even more revealing: the way her behavior changes specifically around you. This is one of the signs that people often overlook because they're looking for dramatic gestures. In reality, attraction frequently appears through subtle differences. Pay attention to how she interacts with everyone else. Then compare it to how she interacts with you. Does her energy shift? Does her tone change? Does she become slightly more reserved? Or perhaps more animated? Does she laugh more easily? Does she suddenly seem more aware of herself? These small changes happen because emotions affect physiology. When someone matters to us, our nervous system responds. Our heart rate can increase. Our attention becomes sharper. We become more conscious of our words. We care more about the impression we're making. That's why people often behave differently around those they value. It's not always confidence. Sometimes it's nervousness. Sometimes it's excitement. Sometimes it's both at the same time. I once spoke with a woman who described meeting a man she genuinely liked. She was normally outgoing and confident, yet every time he entered the room, she became quieter. At first, she thought something was wrong. Eventually, she realized the opposite was true. She cared so much about his opinion that she became unusually self-aware. Her behavior changed because her emotions changed. And that's something many men misinterpret. They assume nervousness means discomfort. Sometimes it does, but other times it means significance. The key is context. And that's why observation always matters more than assumptions. Now let's discuss something that often generates controversy: testing behavior. You've probably heard people talk about tests in dating. The truth is that many people unconsciously test emotional stability, not because they're trying to create drama, because they're gathering information. Imagine you're considering allowing someone into your emotional world. You naturally want to know how they handle challenges, how they respond to disappointment, how they react under pressure, how secure they are. A woman may casually mention another man and observe your reaction, not necessarily to provoke jealousy, but to understand your confidence level. She may disagree with you on something small, not because she wants conflict, but because she wants to see whether you remain respectful. She may occasionally create situations that reveal character. Because attraction alone isn't enough. Trust matters too. Emotional safety matters too. Character matters too. This is something many people learn later in life. Chemistry creates interest, but consistency creates trust, and trust is what allows attraction to grow into something meaningful. Which brings us to perhaps the most important lesson in this entire discussion. If you genuinely believe a woman may be interested in you, your greatest advantage is not trying harder. It's becoming calmer. The biggest mistake many men make is reacting to uncertainty with panic. They overanalyze every text. They chase every mixed signal. They seek constant reassurance. And ironically, that anxiety often pushes people away. Confidence isn't knowing exactly how someone feels. Confidence is being okay even when you don't know. It's maintaining your self-respect while allowing relationships to unfold naturally. It's understanding that another person's feelings are not something you can force. They're something you discover together, over time. This mindset changes everything. Instead of asking, "How do I make her like me?" you begin asking, "Are we genuinely compatible?" Instead of obsessing over every signal, you become curious about the bigger picture. Instead of chasing certainty, you develop patience. And patience is incredibly attractive, because patient people communicate emotional stability. They show that their happiness doesn't depend entirely on someone else's response. Now, before we finish, I want to address something important. There is a difference between attraction and obsession. A healthy attraction creates curiosity, excitement, and emotional investment. An unhealthy obsession creates anxiety, fixation, and emotional imbalance. If someone genuinely likes you, their interest will eventually reveal itself through consistent patterns, not just isolated moments. That's why it's important to look for repeated behaviors over time. Not one glance, not one text, not one interaction. Patterns. Patterns tell the truth. Anyone can send a message. Anyone can have a good conversation. Anyone can smile. But consistent attention, repeated effort, genuine curiosity, and ongoing emotional investment are much harder to fake. That's where real understanding begins. As we wrap up, I want you to remember something. The quietest signals are often the easiest to miss. Sometimes the person who seems completely calm has been thinking about you far more than you realize. Sometimes the person who appears distant is actually protecting a vulnerable part of themselves. And sometimes what looks like indifference is really uncertainty wearing a disguise. That doesn't mean every distant person is secretly interested, but it does mean human emotions are far more complex than they appear on the surface. The most successful people in relationships are not those who jump to conclusions. They are the ones who observe carefully, listen closely, stay patient, and allow people enough space to reveal who they truly are. If today's conversation gave you a new perspective, leave the word aware in the comments below. I'd love to see how many people are learning to recognize the deeper emotional patterns that most others miss. And if you've ever experienced a situation where someone's feelings became obvious only after you stopped assuming and started observing, share your story. Your experience might help someone else who is struggling to understand their own situation. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could benefit from understanding these subtle signs of attraction and emotional connection. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, meaningful relationships are rarely built on grand gestures alone. More often, they're built on small moments, quiet observations, patient understanding, and the courage to see beyond what appears obvious. Keep your eyes open, keep your heart grounded, stay curious about people, stay kind in your assumptions, and never underestimate the power of the things that are left unsaid. Sometimes the deepest emotions are not the loudest ones. They're the quiet feelings hiding just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be understood. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of the people you value, and keep learning about the fascinating world of human connection. There is always more to discover about the human heart, and every conversation brings us one step closer to understanding it.